73 men armed with kitchen knives did what no army in the world dared to do: confront Rome. They had no armor, no swords, no horses, only meat cleavers and roasting spits stolen from a gladiator school kitchen. They were slaves. They were trained to kill each other for Roman entertainment. But on a summer morning in 73 BC, they decided to kill the spectators instead of each other. 2 years later, that kitchen knife army would grow to 120,000 people. They would defeat 9 consecutive Roman armies. They would make the Senate tremble. How did an obscure slave from Thrace almost turn Rome, the most powerful empire in history, into ashes? The world on that day summer, 73 BC. The city of Capua lay under the afternoon sun of southern Italy. The air was humid and heavy with the smell of horse manure from the crowded streets. The ringing of blacksmiths' hammers echoed through the stone walls. Somewhere in the city, the scent of dried blood from the arena still lingered in the wind. To the Romans, it was the smell of entertainment. To those inside the arena, it was the smell of death. Rome in the 1st century BC was a perfect war machine. Roman legions had crushed Carthage, conquered Greece, and were devouring the entire Mediterranean. No kingdom on earth dared to challenge Roman power, but that very might created a deadly blind spot. Rome feared no one. And when you do not fear, you do not stay on guard. This empire was powered by slaves. They plowed fields, built houses, rowed ships, wove cloth, taught children, and died in arenas to amuse Roman crowds. It is estimated that 1/3 of Italy's population were slaves, about 2 to 3 million people. They came from every corner of the Mediterranean: Thrace, Gaul, North Africa, Greece, Syria. They had no rights, no names, no future. According to Roman law, they were not human beings. They were speaking tools, instrumentum vocale, ranked alongside cattle and plows. 2 opposing forces, Spartacus. That likely wasn't his real name. It is the Romanized name of a Thracian. He was born in the Balkans and may have served as a mercenary in the Roman army itself before being enslaved and sent to the gladiator school of Lentulus Batiatus in Capua. The historian Plutarch described him as a man whose intelligence and nobility far exceeded his station, resembling a Greek more than a barbarian. He knew how to fight. He knew how to lead, and he knew something every other slave dared not think: that Romans could bleed. On the Roman side, the Roman Republic was at the height of its power but hollow inside. Corruption was rampant. The regular army was largely fighting in Spain and Asia Minor. Italy was left with almost no legions for protection. The Roman Senate viewed the slave revolt as a police matter, not a military one. They would pay a heavy price for that contempt. Why this day matters. This was not a minor riot. This was the only war in history where slaves nearly overthrew their masters. If Spartacus had won, the Roman system of slavery might have collapsed. The empire could have disintegrated from within. The entire economic structure of the ancient world could have been rewritten. A slave with a kitchen knife nearly changed everything. The countdown inside Batiatus's gladiator school. 200 gladiators lived like animals. They were fed enough to fight, trained enough to kill, and chained enough not to escape. Every morning they practiced hacking at wooden posts. Every afternoon they hacked at each other. Those who survived were rewarded with another meal. Those who did not were dragged out with iron hooks. Spartacus lived in that hell for many months. He observed, he listened. He counted the guards' footsteps every night. He memorized the shift changes. He realized that the guards were fewer than the prisoners, that the kitchen had knives, that the south wall was lower than the north wall, and that 200 trained killers, if united, would be the most terrifying thing anyone could imagine. He secretly contacted 2 Gallic gladiators, Crixus and Oenomaus. The three made a plan, but someone snitched. The original plan for 200 people was exposed. Time ran out. The pivotal point. And this is the moment of destiny. Knowing the plan was leaked, Spartacus did not wait. He did not panic. He did not flee. He ordered immediate action, not with the 200 as planned, but with only 73 who could gather in time. 73 men rushed into the kitchen, grabbing knives, spits, and anything that could kill. They slashed through the guards. They broke down the gates. They ran into the streets. On their way out, they encountered a wagon carrying gladiator weapons, swords, shields, spears, a coincidence that history never fully explained. Slaves just escaped from chains now had the weapons of warriors. They fled toward the nearest mountain, Vesuvius. 73 men, one volcano, and the entire Roman Empire below. The war began. The point of no return, Rome reacted with contempt. Praetor Gaius Claudius Glaber led 3,000 militia to Vesuvius, not to fight, but to besiege and wait for the slaves to starve. He blocked the only path down the mountain and sat waiting. He didn't even bother to build defensive walls around the camp. Who bothers defending against a bunch of slaves? In Glaber's mind, this was a small matter. It would be over in a few days. He was dead wrong. Wave 1. False hope. Spartacus looked down and saw the Romans blocking the only exit. Any other general would have surrendered, but Spartacus was no ordinary general. He ordered the men to cut wild vines growing on the volcano's slopes and weave them into rope ladders. And in the dead of night, 73 gladiators climbed down the vertical cliffs from the side no one was guarding. They attacked the Roman camp at 3 a.m. The Romans were sleeping. Gladiator swords hacked into bodies that hadn't even woken up. Glaber fled into the darkness like a thief caught in the act. 3,000 Roman militia disintegrated like sand. News spread across southern Italy like wildfire. Slaves escaped from farms, shepherds abandoned their flocks, craftsmen left their workshops. Men, women, and children ran through the night with bare feet on stone roads. All flocked to Vesuvius. In a few weeks, the army of 73 became 10,000, then 30,000, then 70,000. Spartacus organized them into units based on the Roman legion model. He taught them to move in formation, dig trenches, and set up camp like professional soldiers. He turned slaves holding hoes into warriors holding swords. This was no chaotic mob. This was an army. Rome sent more troops. Praetor Publius Varinius brought 2 other armies. Spartacus defeated them both, one by one, easily. He captured war horses, iron armor, and even the Roman praetor's battle standard, a slave riding a Roman horse, wearing Roman armor, holding a Roman flag. This humiliation burned the Senate. Wave 2. The Storm. Year 72 BC. The Senate no longer viewed this as a police matter. They sent 2 consuls, Gellius and Lentulus, with 4 regular legions. This was the force that had conquered kingdoms. These were the legions that had brought kings to their knees. Spartacus defeated them both. Before that, Crixus, the experienced Gaul who had rebelled with Spartacus from the start, split off with 30,000 slaves, wanting to stay in southern Italy to loot. Gellius caught Crixus and killed him, but Spartacus took his revenge. He forced 300 Roman prisoners to fight each other to the death before a funeral pyre, forever reversing the roles of who was the gladiator and who was the spectator. This was the moment Rome truly trembled. 120,000 armed slaves were marching north. Spartacus marched along the Italian peninsula like an earthquake. He defeated every army he met on the way. Roman merchants closed their shops. Landlords fled their villas. Slaves in their houses began to look at their masters with different eyes. And here is the strangest thing. When the slave army reached the foot of the Alps, Spartacus could have crossed the mountains and escaped Italy forever. Beyond the Alps was Gaul, and from Gaul they could go back to Thrace, to Germania, to anywhere beyond the reach of the Roman arm. Freedom lay right in front of them, only a few weeks of marching through the passes. But his army refused. The slave army was not a disciplined unit, it was a loose alliance of Gallic, Thracian, Germanic tribes, and tens of thousands of Italian slaves. Each group had its own goal. The Gauls wanted to loot. The Thracians wanted to go home. The Italian slaves had no home to return to. They wanted revenge. They wanted Rome to burn. Spartacus turned back south. Perhaps he intended to cross the sea to Sicily, where tens of thousands of slaves were waiting. Perhaps he intended to strike directly at Rome. No one knows his exact plan, but one thing is certain. The moment he turned his back on the Alps was the moment he chose death over freedom. And that was when his fate was sealed. Wave 3. The end. Rome finally found a man ruthless enough to deal with Spartacus. Marcus Licinius Crassus, the richest man in Rome, a man of bottomless ambition and cold as stone. Crassus took command of 8 legions, about 40,000 professional soldiers. And the first thing he did was kill his own soldiers. Decimatio, decimation. Every 10th soldier was drawn by lot to die, and the remaining 9 had to beat their own comrade to death with their hands. Crassus applied this punishment to 500 soldiers who had retreated without orders. The message was as clear as blood. Run from Spartacus if you want, but fear me and you die. Crassus pushed Spartacus into the tip of the Italian peninsula, the Calabria region. He dug a 55-kilometer-long trench across the isthmus, turning the slave army into rats in a cage. Spartacus tried to escape through the trench twice. The first time failed. The second time, during a snowstorm night, he filled the trench with corpses of humans and animals and led his army across. The escape of a man with nothing left to lose. But it wasn't enough. Every time Spartacus escaped, Crassus followed. And the slave army was exhausted. They were hungry. They were weary. Small groups constantly split off and were crushed one by Crassus. The final battle took place by the Salaris River, southern Italy, in the spring of 71 BC. Spartacus knew this was the final day. His army was depleted, hungry, and had long lost its original unity. But Spartacus still had one thing: the defiance of a man who lived his whole life as a slave, who killed in the arena for others to laugh, and who would now die standing instead of dying on his knees. Appian recorded that before the battle, a war horse was led to Spartacus. He drew his sword and killed the horse right in front of his army. Horse blood splattered on his armor. Then he said, "If I win, I will have many of the enemy's horses. If I lose, I will not need a horse anymore." Spartacus charged straight into the Roman ranks. He did not run. He did not hide. He tried to hack a path to Crassus, wanting to kill the enemy general with his own hands, a gladiator's death, face to face. He killed 2 centurions before being wounded in the thigh and falling to one knee. Even on one knee, he still held his shield and slashed until he was submerged under dozens of Roman spears. His body was never found. 30 days later, Crassus captured 6,000 surviving slaves. He did not execute them in silence. He wanted the whole world to see. He crucified them on crosses along the Appian Way, the main artery of Rome from Capua to Rome. 6,000 crosses, stretching over 200 kilometers, each cross about 30 meters apart. A person traveling on that road would take 2 days to finish it, and not for a single second would they not see a dying man. The smell of decay from the sun-parched bodies covered the Campania region for months. Those crosses stood for many years. Bones gradually turned white under the sun and rain. Every slave passing by understood the message. This is the price of rebelling against Rome. Pompey, returning from Spain, destroyed the last 5,000 fleeing slaves and then took all the credit, causing Crassus to resent him for life. 100 years later, Spartacus's rebellion changed Rome in ways no one expected. The fear of slaves rebelling again turned Rome into a police state. Laws regarding slaves became harsher. If a slave killed a master, all slaves in the house were executed. Surveillance was tighter. Gladiator schools were guarded like prisons. But more important than anything, the competition between Crassus, Pompey, and Julius Caesar, three men elevated by the war with Spartacus, would lead to the first triumvirate, then civil war, then the collapse of the Roman Republic. Spartacus lost the battle, but he dealt a blow to the Republic from which it never fully recovered. The toxic competition between Crassus and Pompey tore the Roman political fabric apart. 30 years after Spartacus died, the Roman Republic collapsed, replaced by the autocratic empire of Augustus. A slave caused that domino effect. Lessons for today. Every system of power has an assumption it dares not test, that those at the bottom will accept it forever. Rome assumed that slaves did not know how to think, how to fight, and how to unite. Spartacus proved all three were wrong. The price of contempt was 2 years of war, tens of thousands dead, and a scar that never healed on the Republic. Whenever an organization disregards those at the bottom, remember that 73 men with kitchen knives nearly did the unthinkable. Echoes. The Appian Way today is a tourist attraction. Visitors take photos beside ancient paving stones, stones once soaked in the blood of 6,000 crucified men. There are no signs, no monuments, only stone and silence. 73 men with kitchen knives, 2 years of war, 9 Roman armies defeated. 120,000 slaves once stood up like an earthquake, and the body of their leader was never found. Unanswered questions. Historians still debate, why did Spartacus turn back instead of crossing the Alps? Did he truly want to overthrow Rome, or only to bring his people home? Was he a revolutionary, or just a desperate man trying to survive? No one knows. No one even knows his real name. No one ever found his body. He vanished, exactly as he appeared, sudden, violent, and unexplained. Next week, we go to Teutoburg in 9 AD, the day 3 Roman legions marched into a forest and never marched out. And when Emperor Augustus heard the news, he banged his head against the wall and screamed, "Varus, give me back my legions."